If you want to know the secrets of existence and the true meaning of life, I can't help you. But if you want some book recommendations, why not try reading the ones I wrote? If you're a fan of giant monster mayhem and anime weirdness, why not try Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1? If horror is more your style, you can't go wrong with The Occult Mafia. Those who enjoy their fantasy with a dark twist may be interested in Emerald of Maddox City. And if you're interested in shared universes, why not read all three? Hop on down to the description for links to all three books on Amazon. Enjoy whichever ones you read, and enjoy the video. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni viewer, and here we are at episode 5 of Godzilla Singular Point. On the one hand, it feels like stuff has happened, and on the other hand, it feels like not much has happened at all. And I'm feeling kind of split about this particular episode. But let's get into the details, shall we? So in terms of bringing the story forward, like I said, there is stuff that's happened. First of all, we learn a bit more about the archetypes, though what we learn about it is almost guaranteed to go over most people's heads. Whether it's grounded in some sort of actual science or even theoretical science, or if it's just completely made up, I do not have the qualifications to say, but we're still getting explanations about how it can somehow defy the laws of nature as we know it, particularly when it comes to time. Somehow it's able to draw stuff from the future sort of by looking into it, and of course at the same time we get this explanation sort of delivered to us. We learn that Anguirus, who makes his full-blown debut in this episode, is also somehow able to look into the future. So if there was ever any doubt that the archetypes and the kaiju were somehow connected to each other, such doubt would be completely removed. Though I'm pretty sure we all kind of figured there was going to be a connection anyway. We also get the introduction of Salunga, the creature which everyone initially thought was Gabara because he looked kind of like an updated Gabara. Although he doesn't really do a whole lot in this episode. He's in a pit, and the pit winds up getting closed to keep him from getting out of it. Of course, he's gonna get out at some point, we all know that. But based just on this alone, I have yet to decide whether or not Salunga is really different enough to justify being his own thing, or if he really just should have been Gabara the whole time. All I know at this point is that the animation on him is as consistent as it has been with all of the kaiju. So he looks good, he fits into the world, but will it actually be justifiable to say that he is not just Gabara 2.0? Only time will tell in that regard. But of course the monster we do see a lot of is Anguirus. And they do some interesting stuff with him. Obviously, there's the whole being able to see directly into the future thing, which, as mentioned, ties somehow into the archetypes, and where that's going at this point, I have no idea. But I think what's most interesting about this Anguirus is that he's not an actively hostile monster, at least not at this point. Every time he has attacked someone or something, it's because he was attacked first. And that's curious to me, because, so far, the monsters have been actively hostile. The Rodan flock, they attack the city, probably because they're drawn in by the radio waves, but all the same, they are on the offensive. Manda destroys a fishing vessel for no reason other than because it's there, at least as far as we can tell. But Anguirus, curiously, he doesn't seem to actually want to cause any harm. In fact, when we first see him in all of his glory in this episode, Yun is face to face with him, and Anguirus just sort of is observing him, sort of wondering what he's going to do. It's almost like when you encounter a wild animal in the woods, and you know that, okay, if I don't present myself as a threat, maybe it won't attack me, but I'm ready to run just in case. And Anguirus in this case is the wild animal who's just sort of looking and wondering, should I attack or not? Doesn't seem like a problem until those idiots show up with the gun, and then of course we get the whole seeing into the future thing. You know how it goes if you've seen the episode. But I think that's interesting. It adds a little more nuance to the monster side of this series, because we have a monster now who is not just out there to attack and destroy. He's acting in his own defense. And of course the episode ends with the idea that we're going to get another fight, this time with Jet Jaguar versus Anguirus. Now Jet Jaguar's on wheels. Still looks a little awkward, but it's better than those stupid stumpy legs. And we'll see how that goes. Obviously the episode ends before the fight actually happens. We do get a little bit of action where the hunters attempt to trap Anguirus, and that goes about as well as you would expect it to. But the next episode, apparently it's going to have a fight. This episode didn't really have a fight. And the only other thing I have to say about Anguirus at this point is that I find it kind of weird that the dub refers to him as Anguirus. I don't know why they keep saying that, but they say it enough times, and I don't know where that came from, because I've always been under the impression that his official English name is Anguirus, not Anguirus. Sort of reminds me of M. Night Shyamalan's The Last Airbender, where he randomly decided to change Aang's name to Aang. Apparently people in Hollywood don't know how to pronounce A-N-G these days, except for with an ah sound at the beginning. But what can you do? I'm going to keep calling him Anguirus because that's right. But I did say that it felt kind of like the episode moved some things forward and yet didn't move some things forward. Well, this episode is very, very plot-driven, or no, I wouldn't even say it's plot-driven. I would actually say it's more concept-driven. There's a lot that's done to explain the concepts and the weird mathematical, theoretical physics stuff that's forming the basis for this series. But what else really happens beyond that? We learn that there's a pit where the red dust and Salunga are present, and that gets closed up. Not really much happens there other than us knowing there's a pit with a monster in it. They hunt after Anguirus and set up a fight, but that's not really that vital as far as plot progression goes. And then we have May basically explaining what she determined about the archetypes based entirely on just a single presentation she saw, and then discussing it with Yun through text message again. But what else happens beyond that? There isn't really much to move the story forward, and in terms of the characters, I gotta say, it feels kind of like they're stagnating at the moment. We knew early on that Singular Point would have a huge human cast, but right now I have to say that most of those human characters feel kind of superfluous. We haven't really gotten enough of them to feel like they really need to be there, or at least that they need to be seen as very important. Now, I have a feeling that I sometimes get lumped in with people who like the kaiju genre mostly for the kaiju. And you know, that's not an entirely untrue statement. The whole draw of the kaiju genre is the fact that there are kaiju in it. It's not like a disaster movie where you're just watching destruction caused by something that's a mindless force of nature. A monster actually has an appearance and a personality, at least when it's done well, and that adds a whole other layer to the movie, or the show, or whatever genre it is. So, yes, we are predominantly drawn to a kaiju show because of the kaiju, but that doesn't mean that the human characters should fall to the wayside. I enjoy plenty of kaiju movies that aren't really heavy on the kaiju action and have more of a human focus. Godzilla 2014, Godzilla vs. Monster Zero, those are the two examples that spring immediately to mind. Moreover, my main problems with things like Shin Godzilla and the Polygon trilogy have been based on the fact that the characters were so poorly realized that to call them one-dimensional feels like a generous statement. And even I said that Godzilla vs. Kong, for as much as I liked it and loved the characterization of the Titans, felt like it could have devoted a little more time to fleshing out the human characters, giving Josh more to do than just complaining, or giving Ren Sarazawa more of a reason to be there, things like that. So, I do believe that good human characters are vital to a kaiju story. That being said, I do kind of want to see a kaiju-only film, sort of like what Kevin Smith said he would want to see. But all the same, I understand why a good human cast is necessary. And it's starting to feel like the human cast of Godzilla Singular Point isn't the best. Like, this is the third episode in a row where they haven't really gotten any development. Most of the characters are just there, and they look distinct, but they don't really do anything. At least they haven't really done anything really significant yet. And our two main characters, Yun and Mei, feel kind of like they're stuck. Like their main purpose now is to just sort of deliver all of the science-y sounding exposition, and it's making me wonder, did we really learn everything there is to know about them in just the first 2 episodes, and that's it? Are they just mouthpieces for the writer to show us all of the technobabble he knows now? I hope that's not the case, but the majority of episodes as of this particular viewing of mine are skewing in that direction. And that has me a little worried about where this series is going to go. Unfortunately, I have also seen plenty of anime that just sort of have their characters be one note. And, you know, if they're entertainingly one note, I can get behind that. But if they're just mouthpieces spouting stuff that's meant to sound smart and meant to sort of progress the plot, there's gotta be more to it than that. Then there's also the question of where's Godzilla? And no, I'm not going to get into a rant about Godzilla not having a lot of screen time in his own series. I'm more talking about the build-up. At first it seemed like that's what they were doing. They were going to build up to Godzilla's appearance. And the first episode actually had some good internal build-up to the reveal of that giant Godzilla skeleton in the basement. But ever since we saw that, the skeleton has just sort of been there. We go back to it every once in a while. We've learned at least one kind of interesting thing about it, which is that the song that was broadcast in Lord of the Rodans may have come from it, somehow. But otherwise, the bones are just sort of sitting there. They've become a familiar sight. We haven't even seen them from a different angle other than straight on. And as for Godzilla himself, it doesn't feel like the show is really building up to him at all. The only time he has appeared on screen in a form that looks more like Titanosaurus, but I'll discuss that more in detail when the time comes, that one instance just was sort of sudden. We got to the end of the episode that was focused on all this other stuff happening, and then suddenly we're aboard a submarine we've never seen before, with a crew we've never seen before, and they're detecting something, and hey, look! There's a giant sea monster, and Godzilla's theme is playing, so it must be Godzilla. Then the episode ends, and you expect, okay, the next episode is probably going to have him do something now. But instead, when we're back out in the ocean, we see an attack by Manda, not Godzilla. So that appearance feels out of place, and it doesn't feel like it actually was built up. And nor does it feel like it's really building up itself. It just feels like something was thrown in there to remind us that Godzilla is in the show, and then it moves on. That doesn't really feel like the best way to do it. Now you look at Godzilla 2014, that really built up Godzilla's appearance. It teased us with brief glimpses of him during the opening credits, then we got Serizawa's little exposition bit, where they explain what he is, how he factors into things, and what Monarch's been doing this whole time. And then, of course, we get that incredible sequence in Hawaii where he finally is revealed. But the whole time, you feel his presence throughout the film. You know he's out there somewhere. You know he's drawing ever nearer. And that movie really did a good job of building up the tension leading up to his appearance. You might say it went a little overboard as it kept going, but we're not talking about that in full detail here. The point is, it had build-up. Singular Point so far doesn't really feel like it's had proper build-up. It feels like it just randomly decides to remind us that Godzilla is in this show without actually having Godzilla do anything or giving us any indication that Godzilla is at all some sort of immediate danger. And I don't think that's the best way to handle it. At this point, I feel like I'm sort of starting to wonder, is it just really taking its time and this is going to pay off soon? Or are the cracks really showing this early on? I hope it's not the latter, and yet I'm not entirely convinced it's the former. Whatever the case, the series continues. We're not quite at the halfway point yet, but we're getting close. And unless it picks up again in a way that really gives us a sense that things are going to progress more like an actual story ought to progress, well, I don't know, guys. My initial thrill at the fact that this was so much better than anything Godzilla produced that's come out of Japan recently is starting to wane a little. And I hope it's just a temporary thing, but, well, I'm bracing myself. That's all I can say. And I guess that's all I can say about the episode as well. So, on to episode 6. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off. If you enjoyed what you just saw, hop on down to the description for links to Patreon, DeviantArt, and all of our social media, as well as links for Operation Red Dragon, The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, The Occult Mafia, and Emerald of Maddox City, 3 original novels I think you'll really enjoy. Thank you all, and we appreciate your support.